The first thing solitary takes from you is the part of you that performs. My name is Raymond Harris, and I'm 79 years old. I've spent enough years locked up to forget what year it became normal, but I still remember the day the door shut and the noise of the world stopped coming through. In general population, there's always something to lean on so you don't have to lean on yourself. Count bricks the day into manageable pieces. Chow hall gives you a reason to stand, shuffle forward, complain about the food like it's a hobby. Yard gives you a slice of sky and the illusion that you chose to be outside. The phone gives you 10 minutes to pretend you still belong somewhere. Even the little irritations, someone's radio too loud, somebody arguing about a card game, a guard barking at you to keep it moving, all of it keeps your mind occupied in small, cheap ways. Solitary is different. Solitary is a room that does not care who you used to be. They call it the hole or the box, depending on where you're from. Like giving it a nickname makes it something you can joke about. The cell is narrow, painted a color that can't decide if it's gray or dirty white. The bed is a slab with a thin mattress that never lays flat. There's a stainless steel toilet sink combination that smells like metal and disinfectant and something older underneath. The light buzzes. The air sits still as if even oxygen is on a schedule. And the door is not a door, not the kind you open, but a wall with a slot in it, a decision made for you over and over again. I ended up there because I couldn't stop myself from running my mouth. Not the kind of incident people make movies about. No heroic stand, no dramatic fight, no blood. Just me, old and stubborn, deciding I was tired of being talked to like I was furniture. A young officer told me to step back from the line, and I said something I shouldn't have said, loud enough that other men heard it. I made a small moment into a statement, and in prison, statements get answered. When the escort came, I tried to keep my face calm like I'd done it 100 times. That's another thing prison teaches you. Keep your expression neutral so nobody knows what you're afraid of. But as they walked me past the tier, I could feel eyes on me, and I hated that I cared. I hated that at my age I still cared what I looked like to strangers. The guard at the door didn't lecture me. He didn't have to. He just looked at my paperwork, looked at me and said, "This place will show you what you've been hiding from." That was the only thing anybody said that mattered. They took my property. They took what little I'd made mine. In general population, you have your bunk, your rolled blanket, your toothbrush, your soap, your little stack of letters if you're lucky enough to have them, your commissary list folded and refolded until it's soft at the creases. In solitary, you have what they decide you can have, and they decide it day by day depending on your behavior, like you're a dog, and they're training you with treats. They gave me a blanket that smelled like bleach and somebody else's sweat, and I laid it on the mattress and sat down because standing felt pointless. The silence wasn't pure, not really. You could still hear the building, a distant cough, a shout that started angry and ended tired, the clank of a tray cart, the heavy footsteps of boots that sounded like they belonged to one person, even though it was never the same person. But the usual noise, the human noise, the constant proof that other people were living right next to you, that was gone. At first I told myself I'd handle it the way I handle everything. I'd make it smaller. I'd count hours. I'd sleep when I could. I'd daydream. I'd survive it. Men have been doing that since prisons were invented. What I didn't expect was how quickly my mind tried to bargain. The first night, I stared at the ceiling until my eyes felt dry. I tried to pray. I tried to remember the sound of my mother's voice, and all I could hear was the way she used to sigh when she was disappointed. I tried to picture the kitchen table from the house I grew up in, the little chip in the wood near the edge, the way the morning light used to land there, and it wouldn't come clear. I could picture the prison chow line better than I could picture my own home, and that hurt in a quiet, embarrassing way. By the second day, I started making a calendar on the wall with the corner of a pencil they'd forgotten to take. Just straight lines, one for each day, like a child keeping track of summer vacation. It became my one honest object, my small proof that time was still moving and I wasn't imagining everything. Every morning after the guard's eyes slid past the window, like I was nothing but a box to be checked, I would stand there and add another mark. And every night I would look at the marks and ask myself the question that gets louder when there's nothing else to listen to. Who are you when nobody is watching? It sounds like something a counselor would say in a bright office, but in that cell it didn't feel wise. It felt threatening. Before prison, I was a man who stayed in motion. I worked long hours. I talked big. I made promises I half believed. I was the kind of person who always had a reason. If I was late, it was traffic. If I snapped at somebody, they pushed me. If I didn't show up for my kids' school thing, I had to work. If I drank too much, it was because life was heavy. I turned every choice into something that happened to me, not something I did. I wasn't born into crime. I wasn't some legend. I was ordinary. I wanted money without waiting for it, respect without earning it, relief without changing anything. When I was young, I thought being a man meant you didn't back down, you didn't admit you were scared, and you didn't sit still long enough to hear your own conscience. If there was a hard feeling in my chest, I drowned it in noise. Friends, bars, work, women, deals, arguments, anything that kept me from being alone with myself. The turning choice, the one that led me here, didn't arrive in a single dramatic night either. It came in a series of small permissions. Just this one time because we need the money. Just this one run because it's easy. Just this one lie because it avoids a fight. Then the lies started stacking, and I stopped noticing the weight. I got good at looking my wife in the eye and speaking around the truth. I got good at telling my son I'd be there, and then showing up the next day with an excuse and a joke like laughter could erase absence. When the crime finally caught up to me, people on the outside acted like it was sudden. They said, "I can't believe you did this," like I woke up one morning and decided to ruin my life. What they didn't see was that I'd been practicing for years. The arrest was a moment. The habits were a lifetime. Time inside has a way of sanding you down. At first, you carry your anger like a shield. You blame the judge, the cops, the witnesses, your friends who turned on you, the unlucky timing, the whole world. That blame keeps you warm, the way a lie keeps you warm. After a while, you get tired. You learn routines. You learn who to avoid and who to nod at. You learn what days the commissary order comes and which guards will let you talk for a few extra seconds before telling you to move along. You learn to trade stories and keep your face neutral when someone else's story should make you ashamed of being entertained. And if you're not careful, you learn to make prison your normal. I thought I'd done that. I thought I'd adjusted. I thought my mind was strong because I could survive what I'd put myself in. I used to tell younger guys, keep your head, do your time, don't let it do you. I said that like it meant something. Solitary laughed at that. The turning point scene for me wasn't the first day or the second. It came around the fourth night, when my body was exhausted and my mind still wouldn't shut up. The building had gone quiet in a deeper way. That late night quiet where even the guys who yell all day finally run out of breath. I was lying on the thin mattress staring at the corner where the wall met the ceiling, and I started hearing my own life like it was playing in another room. Not the big moments, the small ones that I'd always stepped over. My son, at maybe 8 years old, standing in the doorway of my bedroom with his backpack on, waiting for me to take him fishing like I'd promised. He didn't wake me. He just stood there, too polite, too hopeful. And I remember rolling over and saying I was tired, maybe next weekend, and the way he nodded like he understood, like my tiredness was more important than his excitement. In my memory now, I can see how he learned something in that moment. He learned that love was a thing you waited for. Then my wife in the kitchen, holding a stack of bills, her hair pulled back, her eyes not angry yet, but almost there. She asked me where the money went, and I smiled and made it a joke, made her the uptight one, made myself the charming one, and watched her swallow her fear because she didn't want to fight. I remember thinking I'd won. In that cell, I realized all I'd done was train her to stop asking. My mind kept moving, showing me scenes I hadn't requested, like it was cleaning out a closet and throwing things at my feet. An old friend I called brother, the kind of friend who always had a plan and always needed someone else to take the risk. The night he handed me keys and told me it was easy, and I felt that hot, reedy feeling in my chest and called it confidence. The morning after, when I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't recognize the man for a second, and then I shrugged and left the house anyway because shrugging was my religion. I tried to push the memories away. I tried to think about anything else. I tried to count cracks in the paint. I tried to plan imaginary meals. But there's a point in solitude where your mind turns on you the way a dog turns on a chain it can't break. The thoughts come back harder because they're not only memories anymore, they're accusations. My heart started beating like I was running, even though I was lying still. My mouth went dry, my hands tingled, and the room felt like it was shrinking, like the walls were leaning in a fraction each time I breathed. I sat up, then stood, then sat again, because none of it helped. There was no one to look at, no one to measure myself against, no conversation to interrupt the panic, no yard to walk it off, no phone call to distract me. Just me and the truth I'd been out running, cornered in a room the size of a bathroom. That was the scare moment, and it wasn't about violence, and it wasn't about another inmate. It was about my own mind. I realized with a clarity that felt almost cruel that if I died in that cell, the last person to hear my thoughts would be me, and I didn't like what I was hearing. I pressed my forehead to the cool metal of the door and tried to breathe slow, the way I'd seen guys do when they were trying not to lose it. I listened for footsteps, not because I needed help in some heroic way, but because I needed proof that the world was still there and I wasn't drifting off the edge of it. When the footsteps finally came, I didn't bang, I didn't scream, I didn't want to give anyone the satisfaction. I just spoke through the crack, quiet, the way a man speaks when he's trying to keep his dignity intact. I asked to see the chaplain. They didn't bring him right away. Nothing happens right away in prison unless it's punishment. But the next day after count, I heard a voice outside the door, softer than the usual, and for a second I felt embarrassed, like a child caught crying. I didn't cry, not then, but my eyes burned the way they do when you've been holding something back for years. The chaplain didn't do anything dramatic. He didn't promise me forgiveness. He didn't tell me I was special. He just asked me what I was hearing in my own head. And when I started to answer, the words came out different than I expected. I told him I kept trying to decide whether I deserved to feel miserable. That's a twisted question, but it made sense to me. In prison, punishment is the language everyone speaks. A man does wrong, a man pays. I'd been paying for a long time. Sometimes I wore that payment like it proved I was still a decent person underneath, because decent people feel bad, right? The guilt became a badge. The shame became familiar. I told myself I was taking responsibility because I hated myself enough. But in that cell, with those calendar marks on the wall, I started to see the difference between punishment and responsibility. Punishment is what happens to you. Responsibility is what you do with what you did. I'd been living like a man who wanted to be punished forever because punishment meant I didn't have to change. If I stayed miserable, I could call it justice and keep my old habits alive in a new place. I could keep blaming. I could keep making excuses. I could keep my heart hard and call it survival. Responsibility is quieter than that. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't make you feel noble. It looks like small, humiliating honesty. After that scare, I stopped trying to win against my own mind. I started doing the only thing I could do in solitary, which was to stop running in circles. I kept the calendar because the calendar was real. Every day I added a mark. I would say silently one true sentence. Not a speech, not a confession meant to impress anyone. Just one sentence that didn't dodge. I lied to my family and called it providing. I chose friends who fed my worst parts because they made me feel powerful. I acted like anger was strength because it kept people from seeing I was afraid. I let my son learn how to live without me long before I went to prison. Some days the sentence was smaller. Today I wanted to blame the guard for my mood, and it wasn't his fault. Today I wanted to pretend I didn't care, and I did. Today I miss the person I hurt, and missing them doesn't erase what I did. That might sound like a grand transformation, but it wasn't. It didn't fix anything. It didn't open doors. It didn't make my sentence shorter. It didn't make nights easier right away. It was simply a new kind of discipline, the kind nobody applauds. When they finally released me back to the regular unit, the noise hit me like weather. Men talking, radios buzzing, the slap of cards on a table, somebody laughing too loud like he needed everyone to hear he was still alive. I walked back to my bunk and sat down and looked at the place where I sleep, and I realized something that scared me in a different way. I could go right back to hiding in the crowd. I could use the routine again, the little frictions, the gossip, the arguments, the distractions, and I could pretend the cell taught me nothing. Nobody would stop me. In prison, you can do that for decades. You can live among people and never meet yourself. So I started taking small steps, not the kind people make speeches about, just the kind a man can actually sustain. I signed up for a class that meets once a week, not because I thought it would make me smart, but because it forces me to sit still with other men and listen without performing. I stopped volunteering to be the loudest voice in the day room, stopped turning every conversation into a stage. When I felt the old heat rise in me, that familiar urge to prove I'm not someone to be disrespected, I practiced letting it pass without feeding it. That sounds simple. It is not simple when pride is the only language you ever learn. I started going to the phone at the same time every week, even when I didn't want to, because I realized something else solitary showed me. On the outside, I used to call only when I had good news or an excuse. I treated connection like a luxury. In here, the phone is a metal receiver that smells like disinfectant and other people's breath, and it costs too much, and the line is always too long. And still, it is one of the few places you can speak your real name to someone who knew you before you became an ID number. The first time I called my son after solitary, I didn't do the thing I usually do, the thing where I talk fast, so there's no room for silence. I didn't throw jokes at him to keep him from asking hard questions. I didn't ask for anything. I just listened to his voice and let it be what it was. He didn't cry. He didn't forgive me in a clean movie way. He sounded cautious. He sounded older than I remembered. That's what prison does to families too. It ages people in quiet ways. When he asked how I was, I wanted to say fine, because that's what I've always said, even when my life was on fire. But solitary had scraped something raw in me, and I couldn't lie without feeling it immediately. So I told him the truth in the smallest form I could manage. I told him I'd been alone with myself, and it changed what I hear when things get quiet. That was all. No speeches, no demands, no dramatic apologies that ask the other person to comfort you. Just a fact and a pause and the sound of him breathing on the other end. After that call, I sat on my bunk and stared at my hands for a long time. In prison, your hands become symbols. Hands can be dangerous. Hands can be busy. Hands can be traded and tested. In that moment, my hands looked old, the skin thinner, the veins more visible, the hands of a man who ran for too long and finally got tired. I used to think isolation was a kind of torture designed to break you, and I'm not going to pretend it's gentle. It can be cruel. It can do damage. I've seen men come out talking to walls like the walls owed them answers. I'm not here to praise it, but I will tell you what it did to me, because pretending it didn't matter would be another lie. It didn't create my demons. It took away my distractions. That's the part people don't understand when they talk about being alone. They think the fear is the empty room. The fear is what steps forward when the room is empty. The things you've been outrunning your whole life don't vanish just because you're tired. They wait. They get patient. And when you finally stop moving, they introduce themselves. In general population, I could still pretend I was the same man I'd always been, just older, just unlucky, just stuck. In solitary, there was nowhere to put the blame where it would stay. The blame slid back to me every time. And once you see that clearly, you can't unsee it. You can ignore it. You can drown it in noise again. But the truth has a way of sitting in the corner of your mind like a calendar mark you can't erase. I don't tell this story because I want pity. Pity is useless in here. I tell it because I know how easy it is out there to live in constant motion and call it living. I know how easy it is to keep your days crowded so you never have to sit still long enough to hear yourself. If you're free, you don't need a cell to learn what solitude teaches. You can learn it in quieter ways if you're willing. You can sit at your kitchen table without the television on. You can drive without filling the silence with talk. You can take a walk without your phone in your hand like a shield. You can ask yourself one honest question and stay with the discomfort long enough for the answer to show up. Not because you want to punish yourself, because responsibility begins the moment you stop lying about who you are when nobody's watching. I'm 79, and I live by routines and counts and rules written by other men. I sleep on a bunk and stand where I'm told and eat what I'm given. Some days I still feel the old anger tug at me like a reflex. Some nights I still hear my past moving around in my head, knocking on doors I can't lock. But I also have that calendar habit now, even out here. I mark time not because time is a gift in prison, but because time is the one thing I can't pretend I have plenty of. And when I look at those marks, I try to make sure I'm not using regret as a hiding place. If you're listening to me from a place where you can open your own door, don't wait for isolation to corner you. Don't wait for the distractions to fall away on their own. Give yourself a quiet moment before life forces one on you and see what you've been avoiding. Because the most frightening prison I ever lived in was the one I built inside myself, long before the state gave me a number. And the first step toward being free, even in a place like this, is telling the truth when it would be easier to keep running.